Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another entry of childhood favorites. And I know some of you are going to look at the title and go, really, that was a favorite in your childhood? Yes, near the end of my childhood, because I first saw this film about 13 years ago almost, in 1999. Granted, it was the version taped off of TV, along with its sequel. But I liked it for years, and I finally saw the original uncut version, and I've loved it even more. And I could say this is one of the few films I actually have two of in my collection, the other being Lord of the Rings, but that's because theatrical extended cuts. And this is this for the same reason. And of course, the version I'm gonna, and of course, the movie I'm talking about is Halloween: The Night He Came Home. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the DVD cover for the extended cut, which some of you are going to be surprised. That's actually the version I prefer watching. Because I like the theatrical cut, it's just I think that the extended footage shot for TV actually adds a little bit more to the film. Get a little bit more character development for the girls, and also I like if the additional scenes with Loomis in it a little bit more. It overall adds a little bit more to the film, which is why I watch this. And the reason I have the other one is because it has a small featurette on it, talking about the film. You know, back in the 90s, and Deborah Hill was still with us, and as well as Mustafa Akkad. Now, is there really much I could say about this movie that hasn't already been said? Probably not, but I'm going to try my best to review. Of course, the movie was directed by John Carpenter. It wasn't his first movie, but it's probably his most well-known movie. This was, I believe, his third movie, but I'm going to double-check. Yep, his third movie. His first movie being, of course, Dark Star, which you horror fans will know was the original genesis of Alien. You know, yep. Then, of course, he directed Assault on Precinct 13. Then he directed this. After this, he followed up with a movie called Someone's Watching Me. Then the TV movie Elvis. Then the 80s film The Fog. Then, of course, another classic, The Escape from New York. Then one of the best remakes ever, The Thing. Stephen King film I hear is actually a pretty good one that I still need to watch, Christine. Then a movie called Starman. Then Big Trouble in Little China. Prince of Darkness. Then, of course, his last film of the 80s, I Have Come to Chew Bubblegum and Kick Ass. They Live. Then Memoirs of an Invisible Man, Body Bags, In the Mouth of Madness, Village of the Damned, Escape from L.A., Vampires, Ghosts of Mars, and of course, after a 9-year break, The Ward, which I've heard bad things about, but then again, I hear he only directed that one, but anyway, based on the films of his I've seen, which I've only seen Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, bits and pieces of Big Trouble in Little China, bits and pieces of They Live. I could say I like his directing style, but it's probably not for everyone. And of course, the movie was produced by Deborah Hill, Irwin Yablans, and Mustafa Akkad. Now, the early production came about after Irwin and Mustafa saw Assault on Precinct 13. They sought Carpenter out to direct a film for them about a psychotic killer that stalked babysitters. And of course, this is Yablans had to say about it. I was thinking what would make sense in the horror genre, and what I wanted to do was make a picture that had the same impact as The Exorcist. Now I'll say, critically wise, it probably, with award wise, it didn't have the same impact, but on the genre itself, I'd say the Halloween had as much an impact as The Exorcist, if probably not more. Because without this movie, we wouldn't have had the influx of slasher films that we had in the 80s. Because think of it, the groundwork for the slasher genre was already there. It started with Psycho, was increased a little bit more with films like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then of course Black Christmas, among others. But this is the film that really laid the groundwork for, other classics like Friday the 13th, among others, continued it up. And of course we got the slasher craze. Now, Carpenter and his then-girlfriend Deborah Hill were the ones who actually drafted the story, taking the basic idea that they were given by Yablans and Akkad. And the original title of the film was The Babysitter Murders, which, I have to say, I'm actually glad they scrapped that title. Because you imagine how the series would be if they had kept that as a title? Coming soon to theaters, The Babysitter Murders 3. With that title, they wouldn't have been able to get away with what they did with Halloween 3, but that's another story. You guys already know from my review that I actually enjoy that movie. But anyway, it's just a weird thought. Now, of course, after a while, Yablans suggested that they set the movie on Halloween, and they named it that, and that's where we get some of the basic premise. Now, the movie was made on a budget of $300,000, which is small then. It's small now, but it was also very small then. but it was 3 times the budget of Carpenter's previous film, $100,000 for Assault on Precinct 13. Now, of course, the whole time Akkad was worrying because it was a tight 4-week shoot, the budget was low, and Carpenter, like I said, only had 2 films to his credit, but he trusted him. And one of the reasons he trusted him was apparently that Carpenter told him the story verbally and suspensively, like going through the film frame by frame, so Akkad could tell that Carpenter had already in his mind what he wanted to do. And I like it when directors can do that, where they can actually visually imagine how they want the film to play out. Which, of course, back in the day, directors like Jimmy Cammey could do that too. And it's one of the things I miss about directors. I wish more directors could do that, but what are we going to do? And another reason is he didn't want to take any fees, although he ended up getting paid up front $10,000. And then, of course, he also retained 10% of the film's profits, which in retrospect was probably a good idea because the film went on to make $70 million, so that's what, $7 million, give or take. Now, another thing is because the budget was low, props and wardrobe had to be crafted from items on hand and stuff that could be made cheaply. Like, for example, the mask that everyone came to know Michael Myers by is a Captain Kirk mask, which I'm sure everyone knows that. But here's something I've just learned in recent years. I don't know if it's fully true or not. But apparently the mask that they used was actually the mask cast was made when Shatner was filming the movie The Devil's Reign. Now, the reason I've heard this recently is because there's actually a scene in that movie where apparently Shatner actually looks like the Michael Myers face. Because, dark eyes and everything. Now, I'd like to think that they probably did the cast that day. It'd be funny if he actually was in the makeup when they did it, but I'm going to guess it was around that same time period, if not on the set. It was around that time period because of how the face looks. Maybe it was after the film they told him to do that face while they did the cat. We probably have to ask Shatner that, but whether or not he'd tell, we don't know. Now, of course, other than the Shatner mask, there was a clown mask idea, but it's probably a good idea that mask was scrapped and then they just modified it. And of course, the mask was originally just $2, but try getting a horror mask nowadays for that. Now, one thing that the limited budget also dictated was the filming locations, and I do like the filming locations they used. It was around Sierra Madre, California, and Pasadena, which is like about a couple hours north of where I live. And all the sets and houses they used was well used, I felt. And of course, Carpenter and Hill had most of the creative control over the script, and it really does show in it. And from what they mentioned on the special features on the other DVD, all the stuff involving all the horror aspect, the murders, and Pleasance's character, that was Carpenter, and all the girl talk was Deborah Hill, which kind of shows, not only in this film, but in the subsequent sequels. It feels natural in the sequels, but not as natural as this one. Also probably because the two were young at the time, so they probably got how younger people would talk. And of course the cast, we got Donald Pleasance, we got the then unknown Jamie Lee Curtis, daughter of Janet Leigh of Psycho fame. And among others, we got, I'm looking for the cast lists, we got PJ Soles, Nancy Loomis, and of course Nick Castle as Michael Myers himself when he's in the shadows for at least the majority of it. Yes, I'm looking on my back, so sue me. Okay, I've already read those. Charles Cyphers as the sheriff, another good one, among others. And the cast all around does a good job, and Carpenter's direction is probably one of the things that makes this film work the most, because it's so suspenseful. You don't see any blood for the most part. There's a lot of uses of shadows, and also his simplistic score really does help the film, because it's not really a complex score, but it's just complex enough and yet simple enough that it makes it very effective, and it's one of the reasons why music is one of the most important aspects of a film. And it's a very atmospheric film, which is one of the reasons I'd say it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And you can tell that, I don't know if it's true or not, but it looks like he was a little bit inspired by Alfred Hitchcock, but I don't know if that's true or not. It just seems a little bit into it. Maybe it's the Psycho influence, I don't know. And of course, unexpected, this movie was a hit. Like I mentioned, it grossed $70 million, and it actually is a film that critics actually enjoyed. And I'm going to be bold enough to say it. I think that this, critically, is a film that critics loved it, I feel this is a film that got snubbed at the Academy Awards. I bet someone's going to say, a horror film at the Academy Awards? The Exorcist got nominations. Rosemary's Baby got nominations. I'd say this film is up there with them. I liked it better. First time around, I liked this movie better than Rosemary's Baby. I'd say I like it a little bit more than I like The Exorcist. So I think it should have been. I actually thought over which ones I think it should have got nominated for. I feel it should have got nominated for Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Donald Pleasence, Best Cinematography, maybe Best Sound Mixing, and probably a Best Score, but I don't think for a simple score they'd give it even a nomination. Those are the ones I believe it should have at least been nominated for, but alas it didn't. But like I said, the best one not to get nominated. The dogs are lamenting it. Yeah, they'll stop in a second. Now, of course, I've gone into all talking about the backstory and stuff. Now, the plot is that in Halloween night 1963, in the fictional town of Haddonfield, Illinois, 6-year-old Michael Myers murders his older sister Judith by stabbing her repeatedly with a butcher knife. And of course, 15 years later, on October 30th, Michael escapes the hospital in Smith's Grove, where he's been committed since he murdered his sister, and he steals a car which was going to take him to his court hearing. And of course, the next day, high school student Laurie Strode continually sees Michael throughout the day, like you can tell he's stalking her, and she doesn't know why. And of course, her friends dismiss Laurie's concerns, thinking, it's just a guy who wants to ask you out, stuff like that. And of course, she continues to see Michael, and of course it leads to a murderous night. Now, as Michael's stalking Laurie, Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by Donald Pleasence, he's basically anticipated that Michael's probably going to return home, and he also knew something was going to happen, which is one of the reasons I like one of the additional scenes in here, which I will get to in a bit. He returns to Haddonfield. He talks to the sheriff, who, while he doesn't think anything's going to happen, he's going to humor the doctor. And of course, later that night, Michael begins to kill people, and it ends with him chasing Laurie and Loomis having to come in and help. And that's basically all the plot I'm going to go into. Know the basic gist of it. I know some people have seen it, but I don't want to spoil it for those who haven't. That's just all I'm going to go into. But let's just say it's a plot that even at the end, even though it doesn't have an open ending, you do feel satisfied with it. Now the reason I prefer this cut, I went into it a little bit at the beginning, and I'm going to look for it. Now, the additional scenes were shot because when it was finally sold to TV in 1980, because of the standards and practices of TV, certain scenes had to be censored, and since I've seen the censored version so many times, I could tell the differences. One of them, Michael being stabbed, I don't see why it's censored. You only hear a sound effect, you don't really see anything. So I'm like, what? And he creates a kind of continuity error in the TV version. Like, why is Michael falling from just a stab to the face with the coat hanger? That wouldn't knock you out. Now, anyway, to fill the 2-hour time slot, Carpenter had to film 12 minutes of additional footage, and this was during the production of the sequel, Halloween 2. Now, the additional scenes include Loomis at a hospital board review for Michael Myers, a scene that takes place directly after where Michael goes to talk to Michael, and he says one of my favorite lines in that cut, "You fooled them, haven't you, Michael? But not me." Really adds to the character of Loomis, I thought. Because in the theatrical cut, Loomis shows up, and at first you're like, who is this guy? Why is he talking about Michael that way? Of course, since I'd already seen the TV cut beforehand, I knew why, but the first time you're watching, you're like, what? But then as the movie goes on, you get it. But those 2 additional scenes, they really cement just how much Loomis, 1, knows that there's something wrong with Michael, knows that he's not to be trusted, and 2, shows that he's not being fooled by it. And of course, another scene is Loomis looking at Michael's abandoned cell before he goes to talk to Dr. Wynn. Another scene with the girls where Linda comes over to borrow Laurie's blouse. Nice little scene. You see the girls talking. Of course, they had to hide the fact that Curtis had cut her hair by then, so towel over the head, but it works. And that's about it with the additional stuff. At least it's very noticeable, but I think it feels to work. I'm surprised they didn't add anything later in the movie, but I guess they didn't really need to. They just needed to add stuff at the beginning, and the scenes mesh well together, even though you could kind of tell if you've watched it enough that the scenes were shot at a different time, but I think it works. Like I said, I prefer the movie with those scenes in it, which is why whenever I pop the movie in nowadays, I always pop in this version. Which I could tell you, this version of the film, it cost a pretty penny to buy because it was like 17 something used. But I could say if you can find a copy of it for cheap and you want to watch it, I say find it. Other than that, try to find an AVI. Damn phone. Sorry about the phone, guys. Anyway, as I was saying, I think when they re-release the original film, they should include both versions of this. Like, if Shout Factory can ever get around to releasing a DVD of this film, I say they should do what they did with Halloween 2. Disc 1, theatrical cut, Disc 2, TV cut. But of course, it would be this. Even though I have it already, I'd buy a new version of it. Never know, I might enjoy it. Might enjoy the features. That's the reason I bought 2 and 3, even though I already had them in my collection. Anyway, acting-wise for the movie, Jamie Lee Curtis, she does a pretty good job as the role. Very subtle acting performance and good screams near the end. PJ Souls and Nancy Loomis, they do a good job as the friend characters, and they have a lot of memorable lines, you know, like, "Can I get your ghost, Bob? See anything you like?" Of course, the singing and all that. And they got some memorable death scenes as well. Donald Pleasence as Dr. Sam Loomis, which, by the way, the name is taken from Psycho for you horror buffs out there. It is probably the performance that makes the movie. And I have to say, without a performance like this, the movie would not have been as good. Because you know the phrase, your hero's only as good as your villain. He is the hero of the movie, even though Jamie Lee Curtis is the protagonist. She's not really a hero in this one. She doesn't really become the hero until H2O. Or you can make the argument at the end of Halloween 2, but I'd say H2O for me. So it's Loomis who's the hero. He's actually the hero of majority of these films, if you think about it, but he's the hero, and because of how dedicated he is, we really want to see Michael get a comeuppance, and his comeuppance works, especially for the budget the film had. And the ending, I'm not going to spoil it for those of you who haven't seen it, but the look on Pleasence's face in that scene really does fit the character, and it makes it seem, even though they do kind of ruin it with the beginning of Halloween 2. Not that it bothers me, but they kind of do. And Pleasence, you buy him as a dedicated and I wouldn't say, dare I say obsessed, because he is a little obsessed over it, which you really do see in the additional scene for the TV version. But as the film goes on, you believe his obsession to be justified, especially when Michael starts offing people. And of course, he has one of the best horror monologues of all time, which I've actually committed to memory. "I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding. Not even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. He's been here once tonight. I think he'll come back, and we'll wait for him." I know I just added that last part in because it's not really part of the monologue, but adds to it. I think you get the point of the monologue. Like I said, I think you can see why I consider it one of the best horror monologues. Pleasence really sells it, and the fact that it's one take also sells it. Now, I don't know what else to say I haven't covered. Carpenter did a good directing job. Him and Deborah did pretty good writing. Cast did an excellent job with the acting. The cinematography was great. The minimalist score was great. All that combined together make this a horror classic. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen Halloween, get off your tush and watch it. And I guess you could say that this is one of the movies that as a kid it kind of made my love of horror grow, because I started with the black and white stuff like King Kong and then some of the Universal horror movies and went on to this movie and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and then it just grew from there. So without this movie, among a few others, I would not be a horror fan.